Hello, my name is Toby. I'm from Washington, D.C., and I'm an airline pilot. I've traveled quite a bit around this region, and Amman is one of my favorite cities in the Middle East.
Amman Citadel archaeological site is named in Arabic Jabal al-Qal'a. Jabal means mountain. Qal'a is a castle. The geography of Amman is mountains. There are 7 mountains, and the residential houses today are spread on these mountains, making this spectacular, overlooking, beautiful view of the downtown Amman.
I'm I'm coming from Holland, and I'm here for 9 days, and I love the people of Jordan.
Et là, on peut trouver qu'au 4e siècle après Jésus-Christ, Amman a repris sa valeur.
Ciao, mi sentite? Ciao! No, figurati.
There is a Roman microphone, so you can speak to each other from the left and the right sides of the theater.
Ti sento anch'io.
Hi, I'm Luca, and we are Italian, and we really like Jordany and all these beautiful things that are here in Jordany, especially this beautiful theater that is close to the Italian one that you can find maybe in Rome or in other cities in Italy.
Of course, they would know about the engineering architecture of the Roman theater because they are from Italy. That's where the Romans empire started. Rabat Ammon, Rabat Ammon. The Ammonites, the kingdom of Ammon, as mentioned in the Old Testament, in the Bible. Philadelphia for the Greeks and the Romans. Today's Amman, Jordan's capital.
That's Amman's most interesting archaeological site with a rich history that covers almost the history of the whole of Jordan. Now, the oldest monument on this side dates back as early as the Bronze Age. There is a cave dating back to 2254 Christ, that's the early Bronze Age, which was designed for burial purposes. There is no any older monument on the site here, but you see, in my hometown, we have dozens of Roman rock-cut caves, but they are much more geometrical from inside. This looks as if it were naturally made. After that came the Iron Age. That is the biblical time, the time of David and Solomon, when there was a little kingdom around Amman. It was called the Ammonite kingdom. The Ammonites established their capital city here. They called their city Amun, which is the source of the modern name Amman. Amun is mentioned in the Old Testament.
Between the Old Testament and the Quran, the same people have different stories. Prophet Lot in Islam, a man that is sacred and never makes mistakes. In the Old Testament, he's a regular man. Lot had 2 kids with his 2 daughters. Lot have slept with his daughters and have 2 kids. One of them is Moab and the other is Benami, the father of Ammons, the father of the kingdom of Ammon.
You see, after that came the Persians in 539 BC. They occupied the whole region when they still keep the same old name Amman. But in 332 BC, Alexander the Great conquered the Persians so that a new Hellenistic period started. That's the Greek period. So in 332 BC, the Greeks came here and they rebuilt the city of Amman but gave it a new Old Greek name, Philadelphia. So Philadelphia is Amman's second name mentioned in the New Testament. Philadelphia means brotherly love in Old Greek. That's love between brother and one sister. This derives from the name of the Greek emperor Philadelphus. At that time, Ptolemy II Philadelphus was a Greek emperor who was in love with his sister. He was married to his sister. It was a common tradition practiced by the Greek emperors who would rather get married to their sisters just to keep their royal bloodline pure. So we have a much earlier Philadelphia than the United States. Ours dates back to the 3rd century BC, mentioned in the New Testament. In 63 BC, the Roman general Pompey came ahead of a strong army expedition that brought the whole region under the Roman influence, starting a new Roman period. So the Romans came here 63 years before Christ. So evidently they were still pagans who worship different gods and goddesses, including Apollo, Zeus, Artemis, and the like. It's evident that the early Christians were persecuted, they were martyred, or even fed to the lions while alive by the pagan Romans. But by 324 AD, Christianity had spread throughout the Roman Empire, so much so that the Roman Emperor himself, Constantine, at that time, having converted to Christianity, proclaimed Christianity as the official religion throughout the Roman Empire. Now all the Roman temples were transformed into churches, new churches were built, and the whole Roman Empire was divided into 2. The Western, with Rome being the capital, the Eastern with Constantinople. The Eastern Roman Empire, the so-called the Byzantine Empire, to which we belonged, that started in 304 AD, when Christianity was our official religion and Constantinople was our capital city. You know that Constantinople is modern Istanbul in Turkey. And you see, this point, until this point, there had been no Islam. It was, you see, still pre-Islamic. But later, our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was born within the same Byzantine Christian period. He was born in 570-71 AD in Mecca, that is now in Saudi Arabia. And you see, later came the Islamic army to defeat the Byzantines in a decisive battle called Yarmouk battle that took place in 636 AD. Yarmouk is the name of the river along which that battle took place. You know that Yarmouk River is the northern borderline of Jordan, separating Syria to the north. When the Muslims came here, the city was still called Philadelphia, but the Muslims were mainly Arabs who spoke Arabic. And you know that Arabic is a Semitic language, so the Muslims preferred the earlier Semitic name Amun, but changed it into Amman. So it has been called Amman ever since the early Islamic period. That's the Umayyad period. And the Umayyads ruled the Islamic State from 661 up to 750 AD, when the capital city of the Islamic State was Damascus. So our capital city during that period was Damascus, which is the capital of Syria now.
Today we are in Amman Citadel. This archaeological historical site is very similar to the Roman site in Jerash. This is a mix of Greek, Roman, Byzantine, Umayyad, Islamic history.
We have the image of a female stone head of what was Tyche. Tyche, according to Greek mythology, was the goddess of prosperity and good fortune. She was adopted by the Romans to be the patron goddess of Philadelphia, Amman, but also the goddess of my hometown. By the way, I am not from the same city of Amman. I come from extreme northwest corner of Jordan, a beautiful town called Mkes, or biblical Gadara. Actually, there you can see the remains of what was a major Greek Roman city with different Greek and Roman temples, Byzantine churches, Roman theaters, and also on the ground Roman rock-cut caves, almost 2,000 years old, with a set of, you see, coffins with the remains of the dead and provided with black basalt doors. Once you push the door open, you get into the cave and find different coffins like that with the remains of the dead. The coffins are regular size, and we see some others which are small size for children. Sometimes you find two slab doors, and sometimes you find all the Greek inscription across the lintels mentioning the names of the dead inside. There we have black basalt blocks and stones from my hometown, which have been brought here for the convenience of the tourists. They include those blocks with Egyptian goddesses, the result of the Egyptian influence in antiquity. And there we have typical Roman grinding stones for grinding grains and wheat, very common in my hometown. And there we have the Ionic capital with a scroll-like image.
Although these archaeological main figures are thousands of years ago, today they are very important in Amman's identity. The Roman theater in the downtown Amman, the Amman Citadel.
Down there where we have a huge Roman theater. It is the largest in the whole region. It admits 6,000 spectators that has been recently restored. Now it's being used for cultural events, for dancing, singing, for play acting.
From the top of the mountain, from Amman Citadel, you can take a 10 minutes hike into the Roman theater in the downtown Amman.
That you see theater was established during the time of the Roman Emperor Antonius Pius, who ruled from 138 up to 161 AD. That is to say the 2nd century AD. In the front of that theater, there is a large rectangular courtyard. That was, you see, the Forum of Philadelphia, or the Agora, which was lined with columns. The columns were topped with capitals. To the left of that forum, there is another but smaller theater that was roofed over called Odeon or Odeum. That was designed for musical concerts. The capacity of that Odeon was 500 spectators.
There is the main Roman theater, and there is a smaller theater that is next to it.
This modern road was established in line with an earlier Roman road. The Roman road was, you see, 800 meters long. It was 10 meters wide, lined with huge columns. The columns were topped with the Corinthian capitals. It was provided with monumental gateways. And there was a huge staircase that led up from the forum to the citadel, which the Romans climbed up during times of war to seek protection and refuge here on the citadel.
The geography of Amman is mountainous. There are 7 different mountains, and understanding the archaeological historical site, they always choose the most overlooking protective sites of the city.
You see, here in front of us we have the remains of what was a beautiful mosaic floor with crosses. The crosses determine that, you see, this monument must have been established by the Christians in the Byzantine period, because before that it was the Romans who were pagans, and after that the Muslims. Now in the distance there you can see that green area with lots of trees. There is a huge white limestone building. That's the royal court, and the whole green area with a building inside is a royal family palace called Ragadan Palace, which was established, you see, in the 1920s, where the first king of Jordan, founder of the new state of Jordan, lived, King Abdullah I, whose tomb now is there. In the Roman period, Philadelphia was perched on 7 hills. That's why it said the Roman official soldiers preferred Philadelphia to any other city in the area, probably because it reminded them of their native city. However, nowadays, Amman has grown out of all proportions that we have more than 4.5 million people living in Amman. The result of the different Arab-Israeli wars, the Gulf Wars, the Arab Spring, creating different waves of refugees, so that we have more than 4.5 million people living in Amman. Now you see, down there we have Amman downtown, where we have the old bazaar, the gold shops, spice shops and the like. And you see the old hotels, small hotels, restaurants, the vegetable and fruit market and so on. And down there you can see the tall tower of the oldest mosque in the whole region. That's Al Hussein Mosque. Originally, that was established over the remains of what was the so-called Al-Umari Mosque, Masjid Al-Umari. It was established in the early Islamic period, maybe in 640 AD, but the existent version dates back to 1923, I think. That is not open to the tourists, it's only for prayers. But there at the top you can see another mosque with a dome and a minaret. That is Abu Darwish Mosque, which was established by the Circassians. The Circassians are an ethnical minority who came from southern Russia, from the Caucasus Mountains in 1878. As a result of religious persecution, they were welcomed by the Ottomans. We were still under the Ottoman influence when the Circassians came. Now they are well integrated into the Jordanian society.
Today what's left is ruins. We have the ruined Roman temple. We have the destroyed Hercules statue. There are questions that I've always asked myself growing up in Amman. Where did the statue of Hercules go? Why do we have a ruined temple?
We have those huge columns of what was a Roman temple, which was established in the time of the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who ruled from 161 up to 180 AD. It was dedicated to Hercules. As you know, that Hercules represents the, you see, supernatural physical strength, his father being Zeus, his mother was mortal, her name was Alcmene, according to the Greek mythology.
This is a clear view of the foundation of the Roman temple, or what's left from the Roman temple.
Now, here we have a hypothetical reconstruction of the temple. We think that the temple was originally designed like this. And this is a simple modern crane, the model of which is believed to have been used by the Romans during construction. Some columns have been recently re-erected, others are still collapsed as a result of the earthquakes that struck the area. The most powerful earthquake to strike the area was that which struck in 749 AD, causing several settlements to disappear for good.
There is a major earthquake happened in the region that destroyed the temple and the other historical main figures. If you are familiar with the different archaeological sites in the Middle East, I find this very interesting sometimes. Why is it that we always find the Roman, the Greek, the Byzantine, and the Islamic history all together in one place?
And don't forget that, you see, later the Byzantines, you see, recycled the old Roman blocks and stones they had recovered from early Roman temples.
The Byzantines are using the temple to build their church. The Umayyad and the Islamic Caliphates are using the church to build their mosque. These civilizations have wanted to mark their territory. This is what has been happening.
Here we have a Byzantine church that dates back to 550 AD when the Byzantines recycled the old Roman blocks and stones they had recovered from early Roman temples. This was a kind of a basilica with the main apse being oriented towards the east. In the center, the nave was paved with mosaic stone with columns. The columns are topped with capitals. This kind of capital, this order is so-called Corinthian, marked with a floral motif. This represents a certain wild plant called acanthus. Now, over the stones there, we have Old Greek inscription, not Latin as expected. You know that the Romans spoke Latin. However, they would use Old Greek for religious purposes, as their, you see, religion and their gods and goddesses were adopted from the Greek mythology.
There are different stories explains what happened. There are major earthquakes that destroyed the temple and the statue and all the different archaeological sites in Jordan. There are other stories where the stones of the temple have been used to build the Byzantine church and later on the Umayyad mosques. There are other stories of some of it have been smuggled outside of Jordan. The statue of Hercules today, this is what's left from the statue of Hercules. It's only his 3 fingers and the elbow, and his private parts are left. Where did the statue of Hercules go? 3 fingers, his elbow, and his private parts are left from the statue of Hercules, a statue that is believed to be one of the biggest in the Roman history.
So we have here the remains of what was a water system established by the Umayyads in 730 AD. That is the time when they built their palace there. It was designed for catching and storing rainwater. Actually, Amman received an annual average of rainfall that ranges from 250 up to 400 millimeters per year. It's very common to have snowstorms in Amman, but if you go 10 kilometers east, the desert starts where rain is little. 75% of Jordan is deserts where rain does not exceed 60 millimeters per year. However, if you go to the desert, for instance, Wadi Ram, which is close to the DC desert, there you will surprisingly see large green patches with olive trees, vegetables, and even during the high season, you find large watermelons thanks to the underground water. You don't believe that you see the high quality drinking water that we receive in Amman comes from the heart of the desert through large pipes that run for 300 kilometers long. We have such a kind of desert here in Jordan that if water is provided, then cultivation is possible. However, in the regular deserts, it would be not possible no matter how much water you provide. So Jordan is still one of the poorest countries in the whole of the world. Now we have a huge water tank built by the Umayyads to collect and store rainwater. The water that came from a rooftop to the palace, the rainwater, which came down the gutters along channels, finally poured into this huge water reservoir. Imagine you see monuments with different, gutter systems and channels that all poured into this huge water reservoir. But according to scholars, they believe that, this reservoir remained uncovered. So the water couldn't have been clean enough for drinking. It must have been used for irrigational or washing purposes. Now there is a staircase which was designed for maintenance and for cleaning the system here. And in the middle, at the bottom there was a tall pillar that was calibrated to gauge the water level inside. Now here we have the remains of what was a bathing house that belonged to the Umayyad palace, which consists of different sections: the cold bath section, hot bath section, change clothes, and the like. Here we have the Umayyad palace that was established in 730 AD, which has been recently restored by a Spanish team. You can easily distinguish the newly carved blocks and stones made by a Spanish team to replace the missing blocks. The dome too is modern. From the outside, it is covered with a thin sheet of lead. From the inside, it is wooden. It is believed that it was originally built out of stones. Now, if we look towards that direction, you can see a monumental gateway and also a processional staircase. And this courtyard was lined with 2 rows of shops that date back to the Umayyad period. And here we have an earlier Roman rock cut cistern or well that was designed for catching and storing rainwater. So here we have the palace from inside with a wooden dome that has been recently established by the Spanish team. Those chambers flanking the main entrance are believed to have been designed for waiting rooms where the guests would wait for their turn to come and see the governor inside, not the caliph, because the caliph must have lived far away in Damascus. You see the floor design looks like a cross, suggesting there could have been an earlier Byzantine church before the palace was established, but nobody can say for sure. We are almost, certain that the foundations of this palace must have been originally an integral part of a larger Roman temple outside. Now you see the blocks stained black, the result of the recent use of this monument by the Bedouin who would come here in winter time along with their goats and sheep. They would make fire for cooking and heating. And you see the concept of the dome is believed to have been originally designed by the Persians. So we have a Persian influence in this construction. The floor is modern, so is this sewer here. And outside, we have the remains of what was a large Roman temple. Another Roman temple here, which must have been dedicated to Tyche, the goddess of Philadelphia, Amman, as we found her stone here during the excavation. You can see the remains of what were massive walls all the way around. The walls of what was a major Roman temple dedicated to Tyche, with a series of niches, or the so-called alcoves. Those niches were designed for displaying the different statues. Later, when the Muslims came and built their palace here in 730 AD, that section of the earlier abandoned Roman temple was used for building offices to support the palace here. And this section here was, you see, reused for building an Umayyad house where the staff and the workers must have been accommodated. So it's very clear here that you see the quality of the building here is not as high as that of the major palace. Here we have the remains of what was a large Umayyad mosque that belonged to the palace down there. In the center there was an open courtyard with water basins for the ablution. You know, ablution is ritual washing in preparation for prayers. The sides all the way around were roofed over. And there we have the main apse oriented towards Mecca, that's south of Amman. And you see the Umayyads are the same who ruled Andalusia or Spain for 800 years, where they built magnificent palaces, mosques, universities, where students of Europe would learn Arabic in order to pursue their higher education in the Islamic University in Spain. We still have different Umayyad monuments and palaces, including Alhambra in Cordoba. So the Spanish team is the most experienced in this field of restoration, of restoring the Islamic Umayyad monuments and palaces. So we had to invite a Spanish team from Spain to come here to Amman and do the restoration for the Umayyad palace. By the way, the Caliph, Al-Khalifa, couldn't have lived here in Amman because Amman simply was not the capital city during the Umayyad period. It was Damascus, so he must have lived in Damascus. It was his governor who must have lived in this palace, who was in charge of Transjordan. The new state of Jordan was founded in 1921 by King Abdullah I. Under the British influence in 1946, Jordan obtained independence from the British. And you see, now after the Umayyads came the next Islamic dynasty, the Abbasids or Al-Abbasiyin, who shifted their capitals to Baghdad. After that came the Fatimids, were Shiites who ruled from Cairo. After that came the Ayyubids. The Ayyubids, you see, here we remember Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, who was able to defeat the Crusaders in 1187 in the so-called the Hounds of Hattin battle, which took place not far away from the Sea of Galilee or Buhair al-Tabariya. That is the lake of Tiberias, or Tiberias Lake in northern Palestine. It was such a decisive battle that the Muslims were able to restore Jerusalem from the hands of the Crusaders. By the way, Saladin, though a famous Muslim commander and the ruler, was not an Arab. He was a Kurd who was born in the same hometown of Saddam Hussein, a town called Tikrit in Iraq. The last Islamic period was the Mamluks, who ruled from 1250 up to 1516. The Mamluks, you see, this period ended the Islamic period. And after that came the Ottoman period. The Ottomans, who were also Muslims, but they came from a foreign country. They came from Turkey to rule the Islamic State from 1516 until the First World War. In the First World War, the Arabs joined hands with the British against the ruling Ottomans because they had been promised by the British that once the Ottomans had been defeated and driven away, the Arabs would enjoy full independence and sovereignty over one whole Arab unified state, which would include Lebanon, Syria, Transjordan, Palestine, Iraq, and Hijaz, Saudi Arabia. And you see, the British, as usual, were plotting, along with their allies, the French. So the whole area was subdivided into zones of influence. A Sykes-Picot agreement held in 1916 between the British and their allies, the French. Both Lebanon and Syria fell under the French influence, Transjordan, Palestine under British mandate, and we are still suffering as a result. let's fly back to the Iron Age, the biblical time, the time of David and Solomon, when there were three little kingdoms that settled all across the plateau of Transjordan, or the eastern range of hills. The Ammonite kingdom was around Amman, to the south of which there was the so-called the Moabite kingdom, between, you see, Amman, Madaba and Karak. Further south, there was another Iron Age kingdom, the so-called the Edomite kingdom. And those little kingdoms were Semitics like the Arabs and the Jews, who were always fighting against the Israelites to the west. And so the kind of relation between the heads of states of those little kingdoms was mainly hostile relationship with with King David of the Israelites. So according to the Old Testament, there was once a kind of a friendship that developed between the Ammonite king here and King David of the Israelites. So the Ammonite king and King David became friends at a certain point of time. But when the Ammonite king here, you see, died and his successor took over, now King David sent his delegation for congratulations for this great occasion of the new king ascension to the throne. However, you see, the new king of the Ammonite kingdom was so suspicious of the intention of the Israel delegation members, thinking they were only spies in disguise. So he punished them, shaving half of their beards and tearing their garments around their buttocks, which angered and enraged King David. Now King David, being furious and angry, sent his army here now to punish the Ammonites. One of the Israelite soldiers involved in the battle has such a beautiful wife called Bathsheba. Bathsheba was such a beautiful woman that King David himself fell in love with. But King David, you see, was back at home, so was Bathsheba. Her husband, the so-called Uriah the Hittite, had been in action along with his colleagues here, punishing the Ammonites. Now you see, falling in love with Bathsheba, King David sent his order to his commander here, asking him to place her husband at the forefront in the most dangerous place so that he could be killed and later he could get married to her. Later, King David himself came here to join his troops. He entered an Ammonite temple where he took the golden crown of the Ammonite god and put it on his own head, suggesting there could have been, or there must have been, an Ammonite temple here dating back to the time of David. That was the 10th century BC, but there is a Roman one dedicated to Hercules, which was established in the 2nd century AD. We believe that the Romans came later in the 2nd century AD to build their own version of that temple in dedication to Hercules over the remains of an earlier Roman one, of an earlier Ammonite one, which must have been dedicated to Malcolm, that's the Ammonite god. Sacrilege to narrate such a story and attribute it to a prophet like, you see, Sayyidina Dawood, King David. For Muslims, King David was a prophet, and prophets couldn't have been so mean and, you see, so criminals to the point that they would kill their soldiers just for the sake of women. This is a sacrilege to talk like that about prophets.
The people are extremely friendly. The hospitality is very welcoming, and I cannot go without saying the food is outstanding. So thank you for your hospitality here, and I look forward to coming back many more times.
Every day we change scenery in the morning to the afternoon, and that's Jordan actually. That's true. We see different things in the morning and completely different in the night. We love your kitchen, we love you guys, we love your queen, and your king.
Roman theater and the other archaeological sites are thousands of years ago. Today they are very important in Amman's identity. They are important main figures in Amman identity. I have been filming this video for a few days. This is my third day and I'm going to finish here.
يا يما شفت القمر بقلبي يا يما شفت القمر بقلبي من منزل وبوسيم العين من منزل وبوسيم العين واستغفر الله وانا ذلي كثر العشق غير حوالي يا يما شفت القمر بقلبي من منزل وبوسيم العاني واستغفر الله وانا ذلي اضر العشق غير حوالي مرعية يا البينة مرعية مرعية ولا بلا راعي مرعية